Tamar Bongani rubbed his eyes wearily, trying to shake off his sleepiness after a 12-hour shift at Big Joe's auto repair shop. His fingers were still black from machine oil, despite washing them thoroughly. He stopped at the 24-hour store on the corner of West and 5th, a familiar ritual every Friday. $20 for lottery tickets was his small hope, his dream of a better life. "The usual, Mr. Bongani?" asked the clerk with a tired smile. "Yeah, Ray, today's my lucky day." Tamar forced a smile, even though he didn't really believe it. He had been buying these tickets for 4 years. 4 years of small wins that barely covered the cost. 4 years of ridicule from his wife, Lalia, who considered it a waste of money. "You're throwing our pennies down the drain," she repeated every week when he came home with a new stack of tickets. At home, Tamar settled down at the kitchen table as usual. Lalia was working the night shift at the supermarket where she was a cashier. Their tiny house in the southern part of Dayton was quiet and empty. He methodically checked the numbers, comparing them with the results of the draw on the screen of his old tablet. The first ticket was a bust. The second one too. The third, the fourth. And then suddenly, on the 5th, something clicked inside him. One match, then another, then a third. Tamar felt his heart racing. When all 6 numbers matched, he couldn't believe his eyes. He checked again, then again. "Oh my God," he whispered into the empty kitchen. His hands were shaking as he reread the rules for winning. The jackpot was 1 million teen, but since he had only guessed the main numbers without the bonus number, his winnings were less teen, $245,000. 245,000 teen, more than he had earned in the last 7 years. His first impulse was to call Lalia, but he decided to surprise her. She would be home from work in 2 hours. Enough time to figure out how to break the news in a dramatic way. Tamar hid the winning ticket in an old book on the shelf, their family safe for important documents, and began to prepare a festive dinner. Nothing special. Roast chicken and macaroni and cheese, Lalia's favorite dish. When the key turned in the lock, Tamar's heart began to beat like crazy. "What's this?" Lalia froze in the doorway, looking at the table set with candles. "It's our anniversary, and I forgot?" Tamar smiled broadly. "No, sweetheart, I just have some news for you." Lalia sat down at the table warily. Her face showed signs of fatigue after a long shift. "I hope it's good news. I'm tired of bad news." Tamar silently took out a lottery ticket and placed it in front of her. Lalia looked at him skeptically. "You spent money on that junk again?" "Check the numbers," Tamar said quietly. Lalia rolled her eyes but picked up her phone and began to check the numbers. Her eyebrows first knitted together, then slowly crept upward. Her eyes widened. Is this a joke?" she whispered. $245,000, Lalia. We're rich." She sat motionless for a few seconds, then jumped up and threw her arms around his neck. Her usually reserved face glowed with genuine joy. "Oh my God, Tamar, you did it! You really did it!" They talked all night, planning, dreaming, imagining their new life. Lalia wanted to move to a better neighborhood, buy a new car to replace their old Ford, maybe start her own small business. "We need to be careful," Tamar warned. $245,000 isn't endless money. We have to invest some of it, save some for the future. "Of course, honey," Lalia nodded, but her eyes were already burning with impatience. "But we can afford a few nice things right now. New clothes, maybe a vacation." On Monday, Tamar took the day off and went to the lottery office to claim his winnings. The process took several hours, verifying the ticket, filling out forms, explaining the procedure for receiving the money. Taxes took a significant chunk, but even after all the deductions, there was still an impressive amount left. "The money will be deposited into your account in 3 to 5 business days," explained the lottery manager. "Congratulations." When Tamar returned home, Lalia greeted him with champagne. She had already made a shopping list and a plan of action. "Tomorrow we're going to the bank to open a new account," she said. "I've made an appointment with a financial advisor for Wednesday." Tamar was surprised by her enthusiasm and businesslike approach, but he was pleased. Maybe this win was just what their marriage needed. which had become increasingly strained in recent years. That night, when Tamar was already asleep, Lalia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. 245,000. The number spun around in her head like a broken record. Enough to start a new life, not enough to split between the two of them. The thought came suddenly, like a bolt of lightning. At first, she dismissed it as absurd, impossible, but the idea returned, took root, and began to grow. By morning, her decision was made. Over the next week, Lalia was the perfect wife, caring, attentive, loving. They opened a new bank account together, met with a financial advisor, and planned a short vacation on the coast. Tamar was happy to see their relationship blossoming again. "See, I told you I'd win one day," he laughed, hugging her. "You were right, honey." Lalia smiled, but her eyes remained cold. On Friday, the money arrived in their account. Tamar couldn't stop smiling as he looked at the balance. "We need to celebrate," he suggested. "Let's invite Tyrone and his wife over for dinner?" "No," Lalia replied quickly. "Let's enjoy it ourselves first. We'll have a little celebration, just you and me."
Tamar agreed.
On Saturday, Lalia prepared a special dinner: steaks, expensive wine, candles. "To our new life," she said, raising her glass. "To our new life," Tamar echoed, unaware that this life would end for him in a few hours. After dinner, they watched a movie. Tamar felt unusually sleepy, perhaps from the wine or the long work week. He didn't notice when he fell asleep on the sofa. Lalia watched him breathe. The sleeping pill she had added to the wine worked without fail. She took out the kitchen knife she had hidden earlier and approached her sleeping husband. "This is necessary," she convinced herself. "This is my only chance." The blow was quick and precise, straight to the heart, just as she had read on the internet. Tamar didn't even wake up, just a slight sigh, and his body went limp. Lalia acted methodically, following the instructions. She turned over the furniture, scattered things around to make it look like a robbery. She took her husband's wallet, pulled out the cash and credit cards. She took the watch from his wrist, a gift for their 5th anniversary, and hid everything in a nearby trash can, where she would later retrieve it and destroy it. Then she went out the back door, walked around the block, and returned through the front door. Seeing the ransacked living room and her husband's body, she began to scream. Neighbors rushed out of their homes. Someone called the police. "Help!" Lalia screamed, clinging to the shoulder of an elderly neighbor. "Someone killed my husband! Please help!" Naima Jallo, a young woman from the house across the street, hugged the sobbing Lalia while the police cordoned off the crime scene. "Everything will be okay," Naima whispered, stroking her back. "The police will find the person who did this." Lalia nodded, burying her face in her neighbor's shoulder, hiding her eyes, which were dry of tears. The first responder, a young patrol officer named Jackson, had already called for detectives and medical examiners. It was close to midnight when Detective Alvin Okori arrived at the scene. Tall, with broad shoulders and a piercing gaze, he immediately took control of the situation. He examined the body without touching it, studied the room, and took notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Bongani," he said to Lalia, "I'm Detective Okori. I'm very sorry for your loss. We will do everything we can to find your husband's killer." Lalia looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Thank you, Detective. Who could have done this? Who would want to kill Tamar?" "That's what we're going to find out," Okori replied. "Was there anything valuable in the house? Anything that might have attracted burglars?" Lalia hesitated for a moment. "No, we're just ordinary people. We don't have anything of value." "I see," nodded the detective, making a note in his notebook. "I'll need to ask you a few more questions, but not right now. You need to rest. Officer Jackson will take you to relatives or friends if you don't want to stay here. I can stay with Naima," Lalia pointed to her neighbor. "She's my friend." Naima nodded, hugging Lalia around the shoulders. "Of course, you can stay with me as long as you need to." As the women left, Detective Okori noticed a strange expression on Naima's face. Not just sympathy, but something else. Confusion? Suspicion? He decided to talk to her later alone. A forensic team was working in the house, taking photographs, collecting fingerprints, and looking for signs of a struggle. Okori watched them work, lost in thought. Something about the scene seemed wrong to him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Detective," one of the forensic technicians said to him. "Take a look at this." He pointed to an empty glass on the coffee table. "There are traces of some substance on the bottom. It doesn't look like wine. Maybe a sleeping pill or some other drug." Okori nodded. "Pack it up for analysis, and check the contents of the bottle too." He looked around the room again. A robbery that looked too neat to be a robbery. No signs of forced entry. A wife who happened to be away from home at the time of the attack. And a strange coincidence, as he learned from Patrolman Jackson, neighbors said that Tamar Bongani had recently won a large sum of money in the lottery. Too many coincidences, Okori thought. Too many questions without answers. Detective Alvin Okori stood at the police tape stretched around the modest one-story house on Elm Street. The night was quiet, but the house was surrounded by commotion. Blue and red police lights flashed, forensic technicians talked among themselves, and neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering the latest news. Okori was a tall, powerfully built man with dark skin that contrasted with his white shirt and smart jacket. The fatigue of 20 years in the police force was evident in the faint wrinkles around his eyes, but his gaze remained sharp and alert. "Detective Okori, glad you're here," young Officer Jackson greeted him, handing him a tablet with a preliminary report. "The victim is Tamar Bongani, 37 years old, a mechanic at Big Joe's Auto Repair. Stab wound to the chest. Presumed robbery gone wrong." Okori nodded silently as he leafed through the report. As he entered the house, he put on latex gloves and shoe covers. The living room was a scene of chaos, an overturned coffee table, scattered books, knickknacks thrown from the shelves. Amidst the mess, Tamar Bongani's body lay on the sofa. His white t-shirt was soaked with blood around his heart. His eyes were half closed, his face relaxed, as if he had simply fallen asleep. "We found him exactly like this," Jackson said. "It looks like he didn't even wake up when he was hit." Okori leaned over, examining the wound closely. One blow, precise and deep, right in the heart. This doesn't look like a panicked robber. He looked around the room, noting the oddities. The mess seemed too neat, as if someone had imagined what a robbed room should look like. "Was the front door forced open?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir, no signs of forced entry. Either the victim knew the attacker, or the perpetrator had a key." Okori nodded, continuing his examination. On the coffee table were 2 wine glasses and a half-empty bottle of red wine. One glass was empty, the other had a little wine left in it. "Have the lab check the glasses and the bottle," he ordered, "and invite the wife in for a chat when she's ready." Half an hour later, the detective was sitting in the kitchen across from Lalia Bongani. She was a petite woman with delicate features and large, expressive eyes, now red from crying. Her hands, holding a cup of untouched tea, trembled slightly. "Mrs. Bongani, I understand that this is a difficult time for you, but I need to ask you a few questions," Okori began gently. Lalia nodded, wiping away her tears. "I understand, detective. I want you to find whoever did this to my Tamar. Tell me what happened tonight." Lalia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "We had dinner together. Tamar was in a good mood." Her voice trembled. "We drank wine and watched a movie. Then I remembered that I promised to pick up my mother's medicine from the 24-hour pharmacy. Tamar was already falling asleep on the couch, so I decided to go quickly myself. It took no more than 30 minutes. When I came back..." Lalia covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Okori patiently waited for her to calm down. "What time did you leave the house?" "Around 9 in the evening. I came back at about 9:30, and I saw this." She waved her hand toward the living room. "Did you notice anything unusual when you got back? An unfamiliar car, strange people nearby?" "No, nothing like that. Everything was quiet. I even thought Tamar was already asleep." Lalia began to cry again. "Who could have done this? We don't have anything valuable." Okori made a note in his notebook. "Mrs. Bongani, we heard from your neighbors that your husband recently won the lottery." Lalia froze for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Yes, that's true. Tamar won $245,000. The money was deposited into our account just yesterday. Did many people know about this? I don't think so. We didn't tell anyone except our closest friends. Tamar talked to Tyrone, his best friend. Maybe someone at his work knew, but we didn't want to attract attention. Okori nodded, making another note. One last question for now. Did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to harm him? Lalia shook her head. No, detective. Tamar was a good man. Quiet, hardworking. Everyone loved him. All right, Mrs. Bongani, that's all for today. Officer Jackson will take you to your neighbor, Okori said, standing up. If you remember anything else, call us anytime. When Lalia left, the detective returned to the living room, where the crime scene team was working. What do we have? He asked the team leader, Morris. Not much yet, he replied, taking off his gloves. No foreign fingerprints, only the victim's fingerprints on the knife, a kitchen knife from a set that was kept in a drawer. An interesting detail, we found traces of diazepam in the victim's glass. It's a sedative. Okori frowned. Was the victim sedated before the murder? It looks like it. We'll know for sure after toxicology, but preliminarily, yes. And the second glass? Clean. No traces of sleeping pills. The detective nodded, mentally piecing together the picture. The murder was planned, not spontaneous. Someone knew about the winnings, had access to the house, and slipped the sleeping pill into Tamara's wine. One more thing, Morris added. We found footprints in the backyard leading to the neighbor's property. They were women's shoes, small. They could belong to the wife, but it was strange that they led through the backyard and not to the driveway where her car was parked. Okori mentally noted this detail. He would have to check Lalia's shoes. The next morning, after a few hours of sleep at the station, the detective went to Naima Jallo's house, where Lalia was staying. Naima was a young woman of Jamaican descent who worked as a nurse at a local clinic. When Okori arrived, Lalia was still asleep, which gave him a chance to talk to Naima alone. Thank you for taking Mrs. Bongani in, he began after exchanging greetings. It's the least I could do, Naima replied, pouring coffee. Lalia and I aren't very close, but in a situation like this... Have you known the Bongani family for long? About 3 years, since I moved here. They always seemed like a normal couple, quiet, hardworking. Okori took a sip of coffee. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Arguments? Strange visitors? Naima thought for a moment. Not arguments exactly, but Lalia often seemed unhappy. I sometimes heard her reproaching Timar, that he didn't earn enough, that they were stuck in this neighborhood. After the win, she changed, became happier, more energetic. And Timar, how did he react to the win? He was happy, of course, but more reserved. He said we had to be careful with the money, plan for the long term. Naima paused. You know, there's something else. Last night, shortly before the incident, I saw Lalia. Okarike sat up straight. You saw her? Where? I was taking out the trash at about 9:15. I noticed someone walking through Bongani's backyard. At first I didn't recognize her, but then I realized it was Lalia. She wasn't going to the car, but across the backyard to the next street. It seemed strange, but I didn't think much of it. Which way was she going? Toward the alley, behind the houses. You can get to a parallel street from there. And then? Did you see her come back? No. The next thing I remember is her screaming about 15 minutes later. I ran out and saw her on the porch, screaming that Tamara had been killed. Okori wrote this down in his notebook. Lalia's story about going to the pharmacy now seemed dubious. Thank you, Miss Jallo. This is important information. Please don't mention our conversation to Mrs. Bongani. After talking to Nima, the detective went to Big Joe's auto repair shop, where Tamara worked. The owner, a heavy-set man with a graying beard, looked shaken by the news of his employee's death. I can't believe someone killed Tamar, Joe shook his head. He was a good guy, never hurt anyone. How long did he work for you? Almost 8 years. The best mechanic I've ever known. Customers would make appointments just to see him. Did he talk about his win here? Joe nodded. Yes, he told us on Monday. We were all happy for him. The guy deserved a little luck. Who else knew about the win? The whole shop, probably. And the customers who came in that day. Tamar didn't make a secret of it. Okori made a note. The circle of potential suspects was widening. I need to talk to Tyrone Kitu. I heard they were friends. Yeah, Tyrone should be in the back of the shop. He took the day off, but he came in to pick up his tools. He and Tamar were like brothers. Tyrone Kitu was a wiry man in his 30s, with long dreadlocks tied back in a ponytail. His hands were stained with machine oil and his eyes were filled with tears. I can't believe he's gone, he said, shaking the detective's hand. Who could have done this? That's what we're working on, Mr. Kitu. Were you close to Tamar? We were friends from college. I brought him here to work when he got fired from his previous job. Our families were close. What can you tell me about his relationship with his wife? Tyrone frowned, considering the question. The last couple of years have been difficult. Lalia, she's ambitious. She always wanted more, a better house, a better car, a better life. Tamar tried, but you can't make much as a mechanic. How did she react to the win? She was thrilled, of course. Tamar called me and said she looked 10 years younger. She was making plans, talking about moving, about a new business. And Tamar, what were his plans? More modest. He wanted to pay off his debts, save for the future, maybe buy his own little garage in a few years. He was practical. Okor nodded, taking notes. Did Tamar mention any problems? Maybe someone threatened him after he won? No, nothing like that, Tyrone paused. But there was one strange thing. Tamar called me yesterday afternoon. He said he found some strange messages on Lalia's phone. The detective tensed. What kind of messages? He didn't go into details. He just said they were messages from some man and that he was going to talk to her that evening. Did he mention the man's name? No, and I'm not sure he actually talked to her. Tamar didn't like conflict. Okori wrote down the information. Another lead for the investigation. If Lalia had a secret relationship, it could be a motive, especially considering her recent win. After talking to Tyrone, the detective returned to the police station. There, he found a preliminary report from the lab confirming the presence of diazepam in the victim's system, as well as in the wine from his glass. Okori reviewed all the data he had gathered, piecing together a timeline. Lalia's official version did not stand up to scrutiny. She claimed that she left for the pharmacy at 9 p.m. and returned at 9:30 p.m. But Naima saw her walking through the backyard at 9:15 p.m. and heard screams 15 minutes later, around 9:30 p.m. There was no evidence of her trip to the pharmacy, no receipts, no surveillance camera footage. In addition, no medication was found in the house that she had allegedly brought for her mother. Okori returned to Tamar and Lalia's phone records for the past month. Lalia's phone contained messages from someone named Jay, which had been deleted but recovered by technicians. Their content was ambiguous but hinted at a close relationship. In the evening, the detective met with Lalia again, this time at the police station. She looked pale and exhausted, but remained composed. Mrs. Bongani, I have some questions about your statement, Okori began, laying out the documents in front of him. I've already told you everything I know, Lalia replied, nervously fixing her hair. You said you left for the pharmacy around 9 in the evening and returned at about 9:30? The detective looked her straight in the eye. However, your neighbor, Miss Jallo, saw you walking through the backyard at 9:15, not toward the car, but in the opposite direction. Lalia visibly tensed. She was mistaken. It was dark. She could have confused me with someone else. Miss Jallo knows you well, and she is certain that it was you she saw. I don't know what to say, Detective. I was at the pharmacy. Which pharmacy? Walgreens on 12th Street. Do you have the receipt? No, I threw it away. O'Connor nodded, making a note. Mrs. Bongani, a sleeping pill was found in your husband's wine. Diazepam. Do you know anything about that? Lalia turned even paler. No. How would we have sleeping pills? An empty box of diazepam was found in your home. The prescription was written in your name 2 weeks ago. That's... Lalia faltered. I have insomnia. Sometimes I take pills to help me sleep. But I didn't put anything in Tamar's drink. One more question, Okori continued. Who is Jay, the man you've been texting in recent weeks? Lalia's face showed alarm, quickly replaced by irritation. "Have you been looking through my phone? That's an invasion of privacy." "We have a warrant, Mrs. Bongani." "Who is this man?" He's my cousin, Jamal. He lives in Cincinnati. We were just talking." Okori looked at her skeptically. "Your cousin wrote to you, 'I can't wait to see you again. The last time we saw each other was too short.'" Lalia opened her mouth but couldn't find a response. Her hands began to shake. "Mrs. Bongani," Okori leaned forward, "I think you should tell us the truth. There are too many inconsistencies in your story." "I want a lawyer," Lalia said quietly but firmly. "I won't say anything else without a lawyer." The detective nodded, leaning back in his chair. "That's your right." When Lalia was taken away, Okori remained in the office, reviewing his notes. The story of the robbery was falling apart before his eyes. There was no break-in, no signs of anyone else in the house. But there was a motive: $245,000, a possible secret relationship, Lalia's suspicious behavior on the night of the murder, and the sleeping pill in Tamar's wine. But he needed more solid evidence to make an arrest. Okori decided to check the trash cans along the route Lalia was believed to have taken. If she had staged a robbery, where were the stolen items? The detective felt he was getting closer to the solution. This was not a robbery, but a cold-blooded murder. And everything pointed to Lalia Bongani. The next morning was cloudy, with heavy clouds hanging over Dayton, promising rain. Detective Alvin Okori sat at his desk in the police station, reviewing the Bongani case files. He had hardly slept that night. Too many details kept him awake.
"Coffee?"
Officer Jackson placed a steaming cup in front of him. "Thanks." Okori nodded, not looking up from his papers. After yesterday's interrogation, Lalia Bongani was released on her own recognizance. The police didn't have enough evidence to arrest her, only suspicions and inconsistencies in her testimony. But Okori was sure she was hiding something. "Sir, the results of the examination are in," Jackson said, placing a new folder in front of him. "And here are the Bongani bank statements you requested." Okori opened the bank documents first. The couple's financial situation before the win had been dire. They were $2,300 in credit card debt, had several overdue mortgage payments, and a car loan. They were barely making ends meet. But what caught the detective's attention was a series of strange transactions on Lalia's card over the past 3 months. Cash withdrawals at various ATMs, payments at the Sunset Motel on the outskirts of town, purchases at expensive stores. For a woman who complained about not having enough money, she was spending a lot. "The Sunset Motel," O'Keefe muttered. "Jackson, send someone to check out that motel. I need to know who rented a room there on those dates," he said, pointing to the statements. The next document was an analysis of Lalia's phone. Technicians recovered some of the deleted messages from the mysterious J. They were cautious, with no obvious references to a romance, but the tone was intimate. "I miss you. When will we see each other again? I dream of our future." The last message, sent the day before Tamara's murder, read, "Everything will change soon. We just need to wait a little longer." Okori took out his notebook and began to draw up a new plan for the investigation. First, find out the identity of Jay. Second, check all the trash cans along the route Lalia could have taken on the night of the murder. Third, talk to the neighbors again. Maybe someone saw something important. There was a knock at the office door. It was Lieutenant Morris, the head of the criminal investigation team. "I've got something interesting, Alvin," he said as he entered. "We found Lalia Bongani's fingerprints on the knife used to kill her husband." "That's not so surprising," Okori replied. "It's their kitchen knife. Her prints should be there." "Yes, but the location of the prints is unusual," Morris said, placing the photos in front of him. "See, the thumbprint on the blade close to the handle as if she was holding the knife to strike, not to cook. And these prints are fresh, on top of the others." Okori studied the photos carefully. "Okay, what else?" "We checked her car. The GPS history shows that she didn't go anywhere on the night of the murder. The car was parked in the driveway from 6 in the evening until the police arrived." So she lied about going to the pharmacy. The detective nodded. That confirms the neighbor's testimony. An hour later, Okor stood by the trash cans in the alley where, according to Naima, Lalia had been heading. The area had already been searched by the police, but he wanted to check it out for himself. In one of the bins belonging to an abandoned house, he found some interesting items. Tamar's wallet with his driver's license, the money was missing, his watch, and blood-stained oven mitts. Everything was wrapped in a plastic bag.
Bingo,
Okori whispered, calling the forensic team. While the experts processed the find, the detective went to the Sunset Motel. It was an inconspicuous one-story building with peeling paint and a flashing neon sign. The clerk, an elderly man with shifty eyes, reluctantly showed him the registration log. Yes, we had a guest like that, he confirmed when he saw Lalia's photo. She came once a week, sometimes more often, usually with a man. Can you describe the man? Tall, thin, with a short beard, well-dressed, not like the locals. Name Jeremiah, I think. He signed as J. Parker. The name meant nothing to Okori, but he made a note to check it out. Did they rent a room in the last few days?
yes, on Wednesday evening.
Number 12, as usual. That was 2 days before the murder. The detective examined the room, but it had already been cleaned, and there were no traces left. However, the manager had kept the CCTV footage. On one of the tapes, Okori saw Lalia entering the room with a tall man matching the description.
Back at the station,
Okori discovered that forensic experts had found not only Timar's blood on the gloves, but also Lalia's epithelial cells. This was direct material evidence linking her to the murder. "Find me everything you can about Jeremiah Parker," he ordered, passing the request on to the analysts. By midday, the information had been gathered. Jeremiah Parker, 31 years old, sales manager at a pharmaceutical company, recently moved to Dayton from Chicago, unmarried, financially secure. According to social media, he met Lalia about 6 months ago at a pharmaceutical trade show where she was working as a promoter.
get in touch with him.
O'Keefe told Jackson, "I want to talk to this guy." At the same time, the detective looked deeper into the Bongani family's financial situation. It turned out they had way more serious problems than it seemed at first. Tamar had taken out short-term loans with high interest rates to cover his debts. Lalia had secretly taken out a credit card with a limit of $10,000, which she had almost completely spent. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, and the bank had already begun foreclosure proceedings. "They were drowning," Okori muttered. "And then they won the lottery." He called Tyrone Keith in for further questioning. "Did you know about Tamar's financial problems?" the detective asked when the deceased's friend sat down opposite him. "I knew they were struggling," Tyrone replied, "but I had no idea it was that bad." Tamar was proud. He didn't like to talk about money. "What about his relationship with his wife? Did they have problems?" Tyrone paused, clearly hesitating. In recent months, Tamar often complained. He said that Lalia had become distant and cold. She often went out in the evenings, saying she was at her mother's or at her second job. He suspected she was seeing someone, but didn't want to believe it. Did he mention the name Jeremiah Parker? No, he didn't mention any names, but after winning the lottery, there was a strange moment. Tamar said that now that they had money, Lalia was back to her old self, loving and caring. This seemed suspicious to him. After Tyrone left, Okori received a message that Jeremiah Parker had agreed to come in for a chat. The young, confident man in an expensive suit looked tense, but remained calm. "I don't understand why I was called here," he began. "I hardly know Tamar Bongani." "But you know his wife very well," Okori parried. "We know about your meetings at the Sunset Motel, Mr. Parker." Jeremiah paled noticeably. "That has nothing to do with the murder. Let me judge that. How long have you been seeing Lalia Bongani?" Parker sighed, realizing it was pointless to deny it. "About 5 months. We met at an exhibition. She said she was unhappy in her marriage, that she and her husband were living as roommates." "Did you know about the Bongani family's financial problems?" "Yes. Lalia often talked about it. that they were on the verge of bankruptcy, that her husband couldn't support her, that they were about to be evicted from their home. What about the lottery win? Jeremiah tensed. I found out about that from her last Friday. She was excited, said it was a chance to change everything. But he fell silent. But what? Okori pressed. But she also said that Timar wanted to keep most of the money to invest it, and she needed the money now to pay off debts, start a new life. A new life with you? Parker looked away. We discussed that possibility, in theory. When did you last see Lalia? Wednesday evening at the motel. She was strange, nervous but determined. She said that everything would change soon, that she had a plan. I thought she meant divorce. Did she mention anything about her plans for Friday evening? No, nothing specific. She just said she'd get in touch over the weekend when everything was sorted out. Where were you on Friday evening between 8 and 10? Jeremiah sat up straight. At a corporate dinner with clients at the Grand Hotel. There were at least 20 people there. Anyone can confirm that. Okori nodded, making a note to check the alibi. Mr. Parker, do you suspect Lalia of murdering her husband? Jeremiah shook his head slowly. I don't want to believe it, but she's been different lately. She became obsessed with the idea of a new life, of freedom. And when she found out about the winnings, there was a strange gleam in her eyes. After Parker left, Okori gathered all the information he had. Lalia's motive was becoming clearer. Financial problems, a secret affair, a desire to start a new life with her husband's money, but without him. By evening, confirmation arrived that the blood on the gloves belonged to Timar, and the DNA on the inside was Lalia's. It was the decisive piece of evidence. Okori obtained a search warrant for Naima's house, where Lalia was temporarily living. In the neighbor's house, the police found a bag hidden in the ventilation grill. It contained documents for a bank account opened by Lalia the day before the murder and a request to transfer all funds from the Bongani couple's joint account. The document was dated Saturday, the day after Tamar's death. There were also printouts of airline tickets in Lalia Bongani's name for a one-way flight to Miami and brochures about real estate in Florida. It was time for the final interrogation. Lalia sat in the interrogation room. Next to her was her court-appointed lawyer, an elderly man with a tired face. Mrs. Bongani, Okori began, laying out the documents in front of him. I have a few new questions. My client has already given her statement, the lawyer interrupted. She is in shock after the loss of her husband and is not obligated to— Let her talk, Lalia said quietly. I want my husband's killer found. Okori looked intently into her eyes. You claimed that on the evening of the murder, you drove to the Walgreens pharmacy on 12th Street, correct? Yes, that's right. Your car's GPS shows that it didn't leave the driveway that evening. How do you explain that? Lalia visibly tensed. I walked. The pharmacy isn't far. But your neighbor, Naima Jallo, saw you walking through the backyard toward the alley, not toward the street where the pharmacy is. She was mistaken. It was dark. Okori nodded, taking out a new document. We found your husband's wallet, his watch, and gloves with traces of blood in a trash can in that alley. Your DNA was found on the gloves. That's impossible, Lalia's voice faltered. We also know about your affair with Jeremiah Parker, about your meetings at the Sunset Motel, about your financial problems, which you didn't tell your friends or neighbors about. Lalia remained silent, staring at the table. And there's something else, Okori continued. We found your purse at Naima's house. It contained documents for a new bank account, a transfer request from a joint account, and tickets to Miami. I want to speak with my client in private, the lawyer interjected. One moment. The detective took out the last document. These are the toxicology results. Your husband had diazepam in his system, the same sleeping pill you have a prescription for. He was drugged before he was killed. Lalia looked up, defeat written all over her face. Mrs. Bongani, we have enough evidence to charge you with first-degree murder. This is a serious charge that could result in life imprisonment. Okori paused. If you cooperate with the investigation and admit your guilt, the court may take that into consideration. The lawyer put his hand on Lalia's shoulder, but she shook it off.
It all went wrong,
She said quietly. It was supposed to look like a robbery. No one was supposed to know. Lalia, don't. Her lawyer tried to stop her. We were drowning in debt, she continued, ignoring him. The bank was going to take our house. We had no future. And then Tamar won that money. All he talked about was investments, retirement plans, long-term prospects. But I had problems to solve right now. I'm 34 years old. I wanted to live, not just survive. Oker listened silently, writing down her testimony. Jeremiah promised me a new life. He's successful. He has prospects. But he didn't need a woman with debts and a burden of a husband who didn't want a divorce. Lalia smiled bitterly. You know what's ironic? I didn't even plan to kill Tamar at first. I wanted to get a divorce and take my share of the winnings, but when we met with the divorce lawyer, he said that in the event of a divorce, the winnings would be considered joint property, and I would only get half. And I needed all the money to start over with a clean slate. She fell silent, staring into space. Mrs. Bongani, Okori said gently, do you admit that you killed your husband, Tamara Bongani, on Friday evening? Lalia nodded slowly. Yes, I slipped a sleeping pill into his wine. When he fell asleep, I took a knife. Her voice faltered. One blow, just like it said in the article I found on the internet. I didn't want him to suffer. And then you staged a robbery? Yes, I turned the furniture upside down and scattered his things around. I took his wallet and watch and threw them in the trash can. Then I left through the back door, walked around the block, and came back through the front door, screaming for help. The lawyer needs to talk to the client alone, the defense attorney said insistently. Okor nodded, gathering his document. Lalia Bongani, you are under arrest on charges of first-degree murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court. While the detective read her the rights, Lalia sat motionless, her eyes blank. The $245,000 that was supposed to change her life for the better had instead destroyed her completely. In the hallway, Okori met Naima Jallo, who had come to give her official statement. Did you arrest her? She asked quietly. Yes, the detective nodded. She confessed. I didn't want to believe it until the very end. Naima shook her head. You know, the night I saw her walking through the backyard, something seemed strange to me, but I thought I was wrong. If only I had spoken up right away. It's not your fault, Okori said confidently. She planned everything carefully. She just didn't think through the details. What will happen to the money? Naima asked. By law, she can't benefit from her crime. The money will most likely go to Tamara's closest relatives. Leaving the station late that night, Detective Okori thought about how the desire for quick money and a better life had driven a woman to commit a terrible crime. $245,000, a sum that could have changed the Bongani family's life for the better, had instead brought death and destruction. Money itself does not make people happy or unhappy, he thought. It all depends on what is already in a person's heart.